Regarding the pathogenesis of cholera, mode of transmission of Vibrio cholerae is by means of ingestion of contaminated water and food. And the Vibrio cholerae is an extremely acid labile organism. So, a very high infective dose of 10 power 8 bacilli is required to bypass the gastric barrier. So, regarding the factors promoting transmission, uh, main factor which promotes transmission of cholera from food to the mouth is the main factor is reduced gastric acidity. Like in case of hypochlorhydria, use of antacids, etc., the gastric acidity is very much reduced. So, in that case, the cholera which had entered by means of contaminated water or food can penetrate into the GIT. And next step is crossing of the protective layer of mucus. So, in the small intestine, the protective layer of small intestine is the mucus layer, and it has to cross this mucus layer. The Vibrio cholerae organism has to cross this protective mucus layer and reach the epithelial cells of the small intestine. Only then they can cause cholera. So, how they penetrate the mucous membrane and reach epithelial cells? This is achieved by high active motility of the So this is achieved by high active motility of the cholera causing organism, which can be Vibrio cholerae or any other organism. And that Vibrio cholerae secretes mucinase enzyme and other proteolytic enzymes also it secretes, and it also secretes cholera lectin. So cholera lectin means hemagglutinin protease. So this cholera lectin or the hemagglutinin protease cleaves the mucus and fibronectin. So these are the three ways by which the Vibrio cholerae organism penetrates the mucus layer and reaches the epithelial cells of the small intestine. That is by means of very high active motility and by secreting mucinase and other proteolytic enzymes, and by secreting cholera lectin or hemagglutinin protease, which cleaves the mucus and the fibronectin. So the next step in pathogenesis of cholera is adhesion. So this adhesion means that vibrio causing cholera causing vibrio has to attach to the intestinal epithelium, that is called as adhesion. So this adhesion is facilitated by TCP. TCP means toxin co-regulated pilus. So this toxin co-regulated pilus is a special type of type 4 fimbria. And finally colonization happens. So after adhesion and colonization, the cholera causing organism is now completely established, well established in the human small intestine. So after the vibrio organism gets well established in the human small intestine, that vibrio organism will produce a powerful enterotoxin called as cholera toxin. So this cholera toxin resembles heat labile toxin of the E. coli in its structure. So structure of cholera toxin is similar to that of the heat labile toxin of E. coli in its structure and function, but this cholera toxin is more potent. It has high potency when compared to that of when compared to the heat labile toxin of E. coli. So cholera toxin is more potent. Both of them resemble each other, but cholera toxin is the more potent one. So regarding the mechanism of action of cholera toxin, the cholera toxin molecule consists of two peptide fragments, that is fragment A and fragment B. So first fragment B is the binding fragment, B for binding. So fragment B is the binding fragment. So this fragment B binds to GM1 ganglioside receptors. So fragment B is the binding fragment which binds to GM1 ganglioside receptors present on the intestinal epithelium. So after this binding to the intestinal epithelium, fragment A is internalized. So fragment A is the active filament. Active fragment. A for active, so active fragment. And this fragment A causes ADP ribosylation of G protein. So due to the ADP ribosylation of G protein, it upregulates the activity of adenylyl cyclase. And since adenylyl cyclase activity is upregulated or increased, it results in intracellular accumulation of CAMP. So ultimately, there is increased accumulation of cyclic AMP. So if there is increased accumulation of cyclic AMP, it can lead to, so in the small intestine, the cyclic AMP will inhibit the sodium transport system in villus cells, and it will activate the secretory chloride transport system in the Krebs cells. So cyclic AMP inhibits the sodium transport system in villus cells and activates chloride transport system in Krebs cells. So these two together, what happens is they lead to accumulation of sodium chloride in the intestinal lumen. So this is what happens in small intestine if cyclic AMP is increased. So after this, water moves passively into the bowel lumen to maintain the osmolality. So it leads to accumulation of isotonic fluid. So due to the accumulation of isotonic fluid, it results in watery diarrhea. So first, if there is increase in cyclic AMP, it leads to, in the small intestine, the cyclic AMP will inhibit the absorptive sodium transport system in the villus cells, and it will activate the secretory chloride transport system in the crypt cells. So this leads to the accumulation of sodium chloride in the intestinal lumen. So this is the first process that happens if there is increase in cyclic AMP. And also the second thing which happens if there is increase in cyclic AMP is water will move passively into the bowel lumen to maintain the osmolality. So it leads to accumulation of the isotonic fluid, and this results in watery diarrhea. So now there will be loss of fluids and electrolytes. So it leads to shock and acidosis. So why shock and acidosis develop? So shock develops due to profound dehydration, and acidosis develop due to loss of bicarbonate. So next step in pathogenesis is the role of gene for cholera toxin, that is CTX. CTX is the gene for cholera toxin. So this cholera toxin is phage coded, which means it is encoded by a genome of filamentous bacteriophage, and this genome of filamentous bacteriophage is integrated as a prophage, and it is inserted to the Vibrio cholera chromosome. So now it becomes a phage genome. So the phage genome, it also encodes for TCP, accessory colonization factors, and other regulatory genes. So this is about the role of gene for cholera toxin. So other virulence factors are also responsible for the cholera. So other virulence factors are zoonoccludens toxin. So zoonoccludens toxin disrupts the tight junctions between the mucosal cells. And then accessory colonization factors. So accessory colonization factors help in the adhesion and colonization. Then LPS, which is the bacterial endotoxin. So unlike any other gram-negative bacilli, the LPS of Vibrio cholera does not contribute to the pathogenesis of cholera. This LPS is only used as a component in killed vaccines, but it does not contribute to the pathogenesis of cholera. So regarding the clinical manifestations of cholera, so cholera is mainly caused by the Vibrio cholerae organism. Vibrio cholerae O1 or O139 is the major one. So they produce a range of clinical manifestations which are categorized to asymptomatic, mild and sudden onset. So asymptomatic infection occurs in 75% cases. Mild infections, the like mild diarrhea or mild cholera, occur in 20% of the cases. And sudden onset of explosive and life-threatening diarrhea occurs in 5% of the cases, which can be due to cholera gravis. And the incubation period of the cholera causing organism varies between 24 to 48 hours. So the common clinical manifestations of cholera include watery diarrhea. So cholera most characteristically begins with the onset of painless watery diarrhea, which can quickly become voluminous, and then rice water stools. So in case of cholera, the stool is typically non-bilious, slightly cloudy and watery with mucus flakes and a fishy, inoffensive odor. So the stool will give a fishy odor, and since it is non-invasive, there is no associated blood or pus in stool. So this uh, the stool obtained from a cholera patient resembles the water in which rice has been washed, so it is called as rice water stool. And next, vomiting is present, but fever is absent in case of cholera. Usually it is absent. And muscle cramps can also occur due to electrolyte imbalance. And if there is progression of all these clinical factors, then this progression is directly proportional to the fluid loss, which results in loss of body weight. So regarding the progression, so if the fluid loss is less than 5%, only increased thirst will be there. And if the fluid loss is between 5% to 10%, the symptoms which are commonly seen are postural hypotension, weakness, tachycardia and decreased skin turgor. And if the fluid loss is more than 10%, it can result in renal failure due to acute tubular necrosis, and it can also cause fluid loss. So this renal failure and fluid loss will ultimately result in oliguria, weak or absent pulses, sunken eyes, sunken fontanelles in infants, wrinkled or washerwoman skin, somnolence and coma.